Sorry, there's a dog eating food next to me, but all right. We left off last week at shallow flooding, which is your AHAO zones. So shallow flooding is flooding with an average depth of 1 to 3 feet, with a velocity of 1 to 5 feet per second. Now, of note, sheet flow is the type of shallow flooding that actually has velocities. Ponding doesn't. So that's one of the differences. Slopes less than 2%, and usually a clearly defined channel does not exist, aka no identifiable flow path. So again, those types of flooding are ponding, sheet flow, or urban drainage, which we don't see a ton of, but we could. So yeah, and then we have like a little fun trick that Nadine made up forever ago. So it's a little song. So AO is sheet flow and ponding, which is AH. So it's a little song. So if you want to remember that. Okay, let's see. I want to move. Ooh, okay. 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 Yeah, so sheet flow, AO zones. The one thing I really want to point out, because it's, again, we're not teaching the test, but it's super useful to know AO zones have velocities. So sheet flow moves. It also has flood depths of 1 to 3 feet. And on a map, your base flood depths are established in feet above the ground. And one of the things that I would highly encourage you to do for the mapping section is to really get familiar with the legend. Half of the time, the legend is basically your cheat sheet for knowing like a whole bunch of, being able to answer a whole bunch of questions. So, love your legend. Ponding. So ponding is your same thing, flood depths of 1 to 3 feet. But this one, you have flood elevations established. And ponding does not have velocities associated with it. Okay. Okay, other flood zones you might encounter. An A99 zone is a levee under construction. An AR zone is a levee in process of being certified. You probably might see some of these, especially maybe on the High Line, or even Missoula County will potentially see these. A shaded zone X. So there's a couple types of zone X's. The shaded zone X is the areas protected by the 100-year because of some type of flood protection measure, whether it be a levee, a concrete dike, a flood wall, or a seawall. You will see that noted on a firm. It says shaded zone X due to what X, like due to levee or due to concrete dike. And it'll usually show up on the landward side of, in the case of riverine studies, and I just have a lot of experience with levees. In the case of a levee, you'll see that shaded zone X on the landward side of the levee. And then zone Ds, we still have a ton of them. And this is basically just an area of undetermined flood risk. Okay, approximate A zones, which are everywhere. So approximate zone A is somewhat old, usually associated with old studies. The floodplain has been roughly delineated, but there's no elevation shown on the maps. So in some cases, this could literally have been Sharpie on a topo kind of thing. One of the things that you can find, I think there's even some like, oh, right now, like the Yellowstone River, part of it is an old existing data study, which would be like a Soil and Conservation Service study or something that you can use, but they don't quite meet FEMA requirements, so you would not see them on a farm. But you can use this as best available data, and a lot of times they might even have flood elevation profiles. So throughout the state, you can still find potentially studies that were not done by FEMA, but are still super useful.
Hey, Peri.
Yep. Yeah.
I think this was for your previous comments, and Gary, you can come off of mute if you want, but he was asking if you had an example
Of this, of the levy portion.
I'm waiting to see if
Oh, Gary, please do come off mute. Interrupt me. It'll make it more exciting.
I'm trying to find an example in Great Falls right now.
Yeah, that's the one I'm thinking of.
well, you can keep going on and then we can come back to that. How about that?
Yeah. So, but I do want to clarify, Larry or Gary, you want to see a picture of a levee? Is that correct? Okay. We'll find out.
Okay.
Great. And Mark, you can let me know when you find it. Okay, so approximate zone A's. These are ones you'll see a lot with like, I don't know, I feel like this is a majority of what I see when I do floodplain permitting around my area, but yeah, they're super fun. One day they won't, hopefully one day they won't be around as much, but we'll see. Okay, so types of maps that you can have, and I'm pretty sure we have most of these throughout the state, but I can't quite, I can't think of things. So there's an old and new format of the FIS with a firm. So that is the most common one you'll see. That's the one that FEMA is currently working with. It's the new format. So these are designed more for your lenders and insurance agents, but this is commonly what you'll see. So, and then there's the flood hazard boundary maps. These are for approximate studies, so older. And then studies pre-1985, which is still around. We still got them. It's a two sets of maps that kind of go together. It's a flood boundary flood. What does FBFM stand for? It's a flood boundary floodplain map. So that's everything but your floodway. And then you have specifically a floodway map. And these were designed at the time for use by local floodplain managers and administrators. So, flood hazard boundary maps, super fun. A lot of Zone A going on, and mostly Zone A going on. These were initially prepared to provide flood maps quickly. There was a period of time when FEMA was just like, let's go. And so that's why we've got a lot of Zone A without benefit of detailed studies or hydraulic analysis, because we had just a lot of FEMA just identified a need to have no flood risk fast. So your shaded area will be labeled as Zone A, and you'll find, gosh, in the 2012 era, kind of, you'll find many were converted to firms by letter from FEMA. So this is one plug here for people, for communities with older studies. You might have an effective date that could say 2012, but it would fall under this, what FEMA calls map modernization. And your effective date might say 2012, but it could actually be truly based on a study that was done in 1977 or something, where, just because of the map modernization, you got a new effective date, but your study data is super old. So I highly encourage you to know what year your study was actually done. And usually you can find that in FIS if your maps were converted to firms. So that is one plug for this. Your old format flood insurance rate map is pre-1985. These were used to determine if a property was in a floodplain. They had insurance zones and then the BFE at that location. So, FBFM maps, I know they still exist. I'm trying to think of a community that might have it. But anyways, they don't have BFEs or flood zones named. So, or on the floodway portion of the map. The 100-year floodplain is divided into two areas. It's the floodway and flood fringe, so you'll have two different maps. And the white area adjacent to and including the channel is the floodway. And as you can imagine, that probably got really confusing because people assumed a white area meant that they were not in the floodplain because nothing's colored in. But yeah, so the white part is the floodway. So that is one thing to note. Okay, and then we've got the new format flood insurance rate maps. So these are the ones that we're currently working with right now. Flood zones were kind of thrown out the window because they were super confusing. So these were introduced in 1985. It provides a lot more info, including floodways and other floodplain management info of note, cross sections, which are super useful. And then they simplify this flood zone. So anything with an A label that was numbered, so A1 through A30 went to AE. And then if you're in a coastal zone, V1 to V30 went to VE. And then on the old format ones, you'll see zone B and zone C. Respectively, zone C became a shaded zone X, and zone C became an unshaded zone X, which is your minimal risk areas. And then your 500-year floodplain also became a shaded zone X. So just remember, shaded zone X can either be a 500-year floodplain or an area protected by a flood control structure, aka a levee, etc. Oh my gosh. Okay. So, sorry, the dog is back and eating food. Okay, so your map index. This is something to kind of memorize a little bit. So your map index is your map number, C, which indicates countywide. And then your the green box down here is your panel number. The blue is the number of revisions that it's gone through. So like fourth time, D is the fourth letter in the alphabet, meaning that this panel has gone through 4 iterations of change and publishment. And then your orange is your map effective or revision date. So, yeah. Again, that map effective date might not match the actual year that the study was done. So that's kind of one thing that never, or not, I won't say never, but a lot of times it may not match. So, okay, I thought someone was saying something. Okay. Oh, wow, we're only 15 minutes in. Okay. Oh, Mark, this is a good spot to pull up the MSC if you would kindly do that. I think we should run through how to find these things. But I'll go through the map index real quick again. So one of the things that you'll get when you get your firms or when you have or if you already have your firms, is you get an overall, like an overall picture map index. And on the MSC, it's got like a little IND 0 on it. It's usually at the top. But this is just, you can look at this one to kind of try and figure out what map you want to be looking at for a certain area. And I might,
Peri, I can pull it up here just a second.
sweet. Okay, yeah, that's super useful to go through that. And like in the case of Gallatin County, you can have 3 different indexes, as you can see down in this little index locator. So yeah, super useful. But I will stop sharing and we can go through the MSC real quick so that you can look for yourself where that is for your community. And I did also want to plug here if so for any changes that happen in your community, you can get an email subscription from the MSC. And I have instructions on how to do that if you'd like those instructions. And I believe they email you monthly. I can't remember, but yeah, that's one thing for if you want those instructions. Okay.
Okay, so we have this is and I think we looked at this briefly last week.
Yes.
This is the home page of it, and typically what you're going to want to do if you're looking up your community, you can just type in an address and that'll show you a map. But if you're looking for the actual products, you want to click on the search all products right here. And then go to the state. And let's say I was looking at Great Falls, but let's say let's go to Hill County. And a Havre. Now we're going to click search. And here are the effective products. Not a lot for Havre. Got 1 firm panel. That's why I picked Havre. I knew they didn't have a lot, but here's the FIS report. And the flood insurance study, the FIS report, contains so much information. If you haven't looked at it for your community, you need to read through it. Particularly, it's oftentimes it comes in 2 volumes. Smaller communities, it'll be just this 1 volume, like Havre's. And you go here, there's a table of contacts, the area of study, how they did the study, and any other studies that might have been done. Kind of overview of a map, engineering methods, and they usually have a section on looking for it here. That was a very brief one. They usually have a section on the history of any flooding. They talk about the Milk River here. And they have a levee. And that's what I'm hoping, if I can pull up the map for this, is that we can see oops, what did I do? Just pull up the same thing. Trying to look how I can move this bar. There we go. Burn panels. Pull up the map. This takes a little while. And here's the map for Haber. River, China Lakes, Red Rock. Oh, I must have pulled up the index map. I'm sorry. That's all they have in there. Yeah, that's an index map. So they don't have any separate ones for Haber. That was a bad example.
I got one pulled up on the NFHL I can show real quick.
Pardon me?
I got one pulled up on the NFHL that I can show real quick.
Okay. I'll stop sharing here. That's just
Okay.
a brief, you can see all of Hill County here, all of the maps that they have. And you can go to the index that I had pulled up. No, I can't find it. And you can pick individual maps out of that. I'm going to
Yeah.
stop sharing that. There we go.
Oh, we gotta
And
check.
as we're pulling that up too, Perry, Cascade County was asking, hey, can you guys also pull up, or can they use the firm panels from Flood County?
Yeah, we do plan on doing specifically Flood County next week. For this one, I think we're trying to do it on the fly. But yes, we will use those next week so we can all work together. I don't know if that's a good answer, but a little bit flying by the seat of my pants. So, full disclosure. But I will show you this and then share and then okay. So this is City of Missoula. And they have levies. They're actually going through recertification right now. But I think this is Area 5 levy, and this will be like a shaded gray color on your actual firm, and it'll have this label that says area with reduced flood risk due to levy. Now, if it was a different flooding structure or different structure, it would say flood risk due to whatever it is. So, yeah, that's what it would look like on your maps. And then basically, yeah, basically, like if the levy didn't exist, this area would be zone AE, is the gist of it. So Gary, I hope that answers your question of what an example would look like. And if you guys haven't used the NFHL either, I usually just Google NFHL, but this is just like a FEMA's map viewer online that you can go and look at relatively fast. It's not always fast. But going back to this, Tracy, can you see my slides?
Yes, we can see your slides now.
Cool.
I can see them too, Perry.
Oh, okay. Well, I will pause here. Are there any questions before we kind of go further?
There's some questions in the chat, Perry. Like,
I think we've answered a lot of
did
them.
we do those? Okay.
Yeah. No one wants to talk to me today. Oh,
It's one of those things, Perry. I think that you're listening to it, but until you actually start using it or
true.
trying to figure out stuff, that's where the questions really come.
True dat. Okay. Well, then we will keep going and I'll keep fire hosing and then it'll all click hopefully next Friday.
But Yeah, but please, if you guys do have any questions as Peri and Marc are going through the mapping portion, please put it into the chat. They'll try to, we'll try to flag them as quick as possible during the presentation, or maybe even come off mute. It's a small enough group that if you come off mute, I'm sure they'd be happy to answer questions as well.
I also think this is a great time just to plug and encourage, plan ahead. I just looked at Tracy and Nadine's abstracts for what they have planning for workshops the Tuesday afternoon before AM/FM. So that's February 27th. And then also a big training on Wednesday morning. And guys, they have interactive scenarios and they're going to be going through these maps, and you're going to be using these maps to, review a floodplain permit. So hopefully it's day-to-day 101 what you guys have to do, but it's going to be in an interactive, fun, friendly atmosphere. So great time for you guys to get some hands-on learning too, if you can come early to AM/FM. There's my plug.
Fair warning, it sounds like this section for a lot of people that don't do mapping regularly is kind of a harder section for people. So I would like to second that plug. You should do it, because I try to be so good at doing it over Zoom, but it is way better to do a mapping exercise in person. So plugging that.
Hey, I just want to clarify for Cascade County, did you guys want the link for the Flood County maps in FIS? Is that what you guys were looking for? Perfect. All right. Go forth, Peri, and do good mapping.
Okay. Map scale. This is a fun one. So fun. Okay, so these can be different on each panel, so make sure you double check to know what map scale you're working in for what panel you're on or map you're reading. That's universal for every map. But so when you're measuring a distance in a stream, which is usually what you're using your map scale for a lot, and trying to find a house, you want to make sure you're following the stream center line. And that's oh gosh, you can see that on a lot of detailed maps and also approximate A. Sorry, I keep saying wow. Okay. So also note there are two different scales for feet and meters. Again, make sure you know what units you want to work in. And the big thing I like to do, and we'll go over this next week, is to just take a little piece of paper, like a little note card or something, and write all the little ticks. So you can see here, like, here's your 0 tick, and then here's your 250 tick and 500. And I just take a little piece of paper and make all my tick marks, so then I can kind of use that to run along the stream center line. And that's a quick and dirty way to do it. There are definitely more precise ways to do it. Engineering rulers, they're useful. I won't go over it that much, but basically you can do the same thing with a string. That helps you with the stream center line when the more curvy. You can also do the same thing with a ruler. Yeah, so same thing, paper, ruler, string. Okay. Oh gosh. This is not useful. Sorry, I'm skipping this slide. Okay, elevation reference marks. Huge note here. They are, can you use a string during the test? No. So the big one during the test is a piece of paper. That was most of the way that
Peri,
yeah, what's up?
I was just starting to answer that. The test is on the computer now.
Oh, yeah.
So there is no paper test, and everything is going to be on the computer.
Do you get scrap paper though?
you get some scrap paper, which you have to give back, or I guess if you're taking it in your house, I'm not sure what they tell you can do if you're taking it in the house. I took it at a testing center because
So
I've
I
heard
would,
the horror stories about the test monitor who's staring at you the whole time. But
yeah.
what happens, guys, is on that computer, they're going to give you some of these maps. They're going to give you the FIS and they're going to give you the firm. But you know how your FIS is 20 pages long? They're only going to give you a few pages. And so you don't, I think it's a little bit easier now than taking the paper test. Now, because I said that, that doesn't mean you don't have to study or you don't have to know, oh, the FIS is where I'm going to go for this information, not the firm panel. You have to know where to find the information they're asking the question, but they give you an interactive drop down and you just click and then there's your FIS, there's your firm. Where
Oh,
before they gave that to you all in one big flurry of paper and you were kind of overwhelmed figuring out where do I go?
I do think though, in this instance with the map scale, I would still use a piece of scrap paper and like literally, put it up on the screen and make my little tick marks. And I don't know, that's just me. I'd probably look like a weirdo, but um, that's you could still do that probably if they're giving you scrap paper.
It was my memory was they already had things ticked and X'd for you. Now maybe I
Really?
had a different version of the test. You just had to figure out which of the 6 areas they had already X'd for you, which one they're referring to, or which one, was in a AH zone. But I also think a good way to prep for the map is to take the floodplain 101 sections and do their interactive workshops and exercises.
Yes.
I'm sorry, for one, can you guys just explain that 101 from ASFPM, that workshop? But also, I did want to let everyone know that we did get an update on the last ASFPM board meeting from CBOR, who oversees the testing. And I know that they are starting to roll out some training for the CFM exam. And maybe this is one of those things that we'll ask them if they can expand or at least provide information to us on how they are prepping people to prepare for the mapping section.
Yeah.
And that would be really helpful for everyone, but they're just starting that. And so hearing what Shailia has mentioned, her and Anthony and Courtney Long are the ones that have, I think you guys are the ones that have most recently, and Ryan, maybe one of our regional managers, are the ones that have most recently taken or are getting ready to take the test. So yeah, definitely any insight that you have, Shailia, will be helpful for folks.
But I will toot the horn of like, this is all super necessary outside of the CFM to know this stuff.
Absolutely.
So quick and dirty piece of paper still works really well for if you're actually reading maps in your like county offices or whatever. But I mean, you might not need to know it for the test. That might be, ooh, that sounds so much better than the version we took. Okay, does that answer your question? There's not going to be a string. They won't provide that. I know that much. But unfortunately. Okay. Oh, I got a new chat. Okay, sweet. Sorry to cut you off. My gosh, I that felt a little aggressive. Um, okay. Elevation reference marks. These are also going out. Some maps might still have them, but they have all this new fancy tech now that you can find those reference marks digitally. But on some of the older maps, you might still see an elevation reference mark. And And this provides a ground elevation reference for surveyors to determine, elevation of cross sections, building elevations, or topography of a site. Currently, you might have one of two vertical datums referenced. And what this does is a datum is basically, how do I explain? Marc, do you have a better explanation for what a datum is? I'm very bad at it. But basically, in your maps, you might find an NAVD 88 if you've got a newer map, or older maps might have NGVD 29. So, just so you know. But I am not very good at explaining datums besides the fact that you need to know which one you're working in.
Datum is just the elevation that's used, so a standard, and that standard may even change. I know they were talking about having another one. Right now we use NAVD 88. In some of your older maps, you shouldn't have any NGVD 29s anymore, but it's just a reference to basically what sea level measurement that they have based on a certain location. And that's really all it is. But they do change. And these reference marks, that you won't find them. I don't think you'll find them at all on any of the digital maps. Like the map and the National Flood Hazard Layer map. They do come up on some of the paper maps, and they're not all RMs or some. I found one that's an S. The way that surveyors use that is they could go to the NOAA geodetic survey information, and you can actually search for that reference mark and come up with the elevation. But anyway, that's those, like I said, they're not going to be on the paper copy maps. If you have a copy of the study that was done by the contractor, like we do now, that they'll have all that information, what they used for checking their elevations for the LiDAR that was used for a survey, and the bathymetry surveys. But those are separate documents from the FIS and the maps. Typically you won't need to dive into those. In fact, I can't imagine that you would do it. Surveyors may want to get some of that information. Engineers may be checking it to make sure that there wasn't a bust in the elevation, but you as a floodplain administrator really shouldn't need that. If there's any question, that's where you'd want to contact DNRC to look into that type of information.
I think you're right, Marc, in that it's just really good to know what it is. It's that standard of measurement, because just like yesterday, we got a funny little email sent to us where they're getting new maps in a certain area, and the property owner is upset because he's getting mapped in. And he's saying, well, it's because you guys changed the datum. And that's why I'm getting mapped in, which there's actually those conversions online. There's that plug-in so that you can convert if you have to. But anyway, just that's about all that floodplain administrators would need to know, is like if they got that property owner complaint like that, they at least know what he's talking about, and then they know to forward it on to the regional engineers or to mapping.
Yeah. And I think the big thing here, on the note of the contractor reports, I don't think you necessarily need to know what's in them, but you do need to have them stored somewhere so that it's easily shareable. I think that's one of the things that we're running across in my old position. That was one of the things I worked on, is making sure you guys had a click buy now shareable version. So I think that's one thing to note, is you do need to know what it is so that you can share it. But yeah, so that's elevation reference marks. Um, and okay, sweet. Um, okay, firm zones, again, use your legend. It is a huge help. But so firm zones, an E on the end of a zone means that it's got elevations associated with that zone. And then, the AO sheet flow, ponding, if you need to remember, sing yourself a little song in your head. And then all the other flood areas. But yeah, that's typically what you'll see. Again, I won't go over or maybe I will go over them, but use the legend. It's got all the information you want in there. Q3 flood data, I have never seen this before, but FEMA has developed a graphical representation of certain features of the firm. There are 3 formats that you can find them in. I have never worked with Q3 flood data before, so yeah, these are the quick things of note from 480 to know about Q3 flood data. And then we're on to how to read a map. I'll start going over this, and then when we get to the part where you need to read stuff, that's where I'll stop, and then we can jump back in next week with the Flood County USA practice info. So, okay.
Hey, Peri, really
Yeah,
quick.
go
I'm
ahead.
I'm going back to look at my notes after I took the test, so
Yeah.
I'll try to find those. But I know on the test there was some sort of question about, do you know what the datum is? But it's multiple choice too. So I don't remember
Yeah.
that being hard or stumbling over. But I do remember, like in the mapping section, they would ask you questions like, where on the maps it'll say EL sometimes, and then it'll give you EL10 because a lot of the examples they give you are the coastal examples. So
Yeah.
elevation, at 10 feet. They're asking you a lot of those kind of questions. And I'm going back to look because there was something about those little abbreviations. So know those abbreviations inside that.
Okay.
That's what I remember.
We can emphasize that too. Yeah, we can go over that. Okay, starting off with what's in your FIS. Again, the FIS is the mecca of knowing things about your first place to go. So you got a couple different sections. As I noted last week, your FIS, if you're getting a newer FIS, so it'd be, for example, Missoula County is going through a study, or Gallatin County got a new study, which I know those are the 2 big areas, but trying to think of who else is the Milk River. Eventually, you guys are going to get the FIS. The new format is tables, so a little less information, but still useful. But if you have an old version FIS, I very much encourage you to keep that around just to have kind of historical information. But so section 1 goes over the purpose of the FIS, acknowledgments, and what happened coordination wise. Section 2 is the background info on the community. This section also goes into info on it's got a lot of historical flooding info. So this one talks a lot about, why did we even need to go through a new flood study? What was the point? Super useful. Section 2 is awesome. Section 3 goes through the methods, and it has a lot of your important, what we call H&H. It's your hydrology and hydraulics tables. So your summary of discharges is in this section. Your table on what models were used, what zones did we do it as, what unique situations happened. A lot of that stuff are in section 3. Section 4 goes over any unique stuff that happened when creating flood maps. It also includes floodway data your floodway data tables. Oh yeah, Tracy makes a good point. You must keep all historic study and map information in perpetuity. Either way, keep them all. It's super important. So yeah, section 4 goes over, what hopefully like what unique quirks happen during floodplain mapping too, because there can be. Section 5, it's just got information related to flood insurance, and some regulation information. And then section 6 is your firm, so they are considered as part of your FIS. And then there could be other stuff, but those are the 6 major sections. Okay, so, oh gosh, okay, this actually does go into mapping. All right, we'll start going through this. We can restart here next week too. So your summary of discharge tables, like I said, is in your section 3, your H&H. So this is a summary of discharges. It has your drainage area and then the profile. So some summary of discharges have more profiles than just this. But these are the 4 major ones. And so it's 9:48. You know what? I'll ask for some participation in the chat. So can people tell me what is a peak discharge that will be used for regulatory purposes at Cobb Brook? And if you just want to post it in the chat.
Ooh,
Sweet.
nice, Paul.
Sweet. Yes. Okay, so for those that have put it in, that is correct. It is 1,080 cubic feet per second, CFS, which is your unit up here. And then my second question, which I'll ask people to take a stab at, what is the drainage area at this location and why is the drainage area important / what does it tell you? Oh, take a wild guess. I believe in you. Okay, I got one from Stephanie. It's proximity to the river. Yep, 4.2 square miles. So what the drainage area actually tells you is, and you can see them. So the drainage area actually tells you what area contributes water to make that peak discharge. So you've got 4.2 miles of drainage area that is contributing water to make that Q value. So why it's important is because some people could maybe go too small in making floodplain. You want to make sure that the drainage area for a floodplain permit kind of makes sense. So anything smaller than 1 is kind of not useful. Again, this is something to just look at, but you can also use the regional engineers to know a lot of these things, but that's why it's important. Okay. I'm gonna click on this link. If it'll work, please work. Okay, here we go. Okay, so we're gonna go through the floodway data table. This is a slideshow that FEMA has that is pretty useful in visualizing it. So you've got all of these different headings in your floodway data table. And we'll go through. So your cross section is your letter. So it identifies the letter of the cross section that you're working with when you see that on a map. So that's the cross section. The distance is the distance from a point. And this little one will denote it at the bottom. You'll see a bottom of the table right here, kind of, when you look at a floodway data table, and your annotations will be like right in the bottom left corner. The annotation at the bottom will tell you what point your stream distance is starting from. So, yeah, so like for example, this is your 0 point, and you're moving up from here.
Hey, Peri, did you see John Sheridan's question? I think
No.
you kind of, okay. He was
That's
just asking about, is that the length of the brook?
Yeah, so the distance talks about length to a point. So if you have like cross section A, your distance will be that will be labeled here will be whatever this distance is in usually the units are called out at the bottom. So a lot of times this is distance in feet. So that's what that's telling you. Now if you're on cross section B, the distance will be the distance from here to here, I think. Gosh, I don't remember. Let me look at something real quick. Yeah. Okay.
He says his question referred to the previous slide.
Oh, backslide.
Yep, go back a
That's
slide.
the
And
length of the brook.
it's probably drainage area. He's probably asking, does that refer to the length of the creek?
No, so that talks about it could and it couldn't, So what it's talking about is what area is contributing to that one point where the that discharge is occurring. I'm trying to think, Marc, do we have a good example of like what a drainage area could look like? I don't have one offhand.
I kind of picture like multiple gullies. You know how like a stream will go down at the lowest point, and if you've got hills or a big valley, if you're picturing like that Livingston Valley to Gardner, the Yellowstone River's going down the center of that valley, but the drainage is going to be all those little gullies and stuff where water or snow melt or rain flow can flow into the river. So it could be a bigger area. There you go.
This picture, like let's say we have a spot right here that they've decided to identify where the queue is. Everything upstream of it, so all of this would be contributing to this drainage area. And let's say if this is the example of Cobb Brook, all of this area is 4.2 square miles right here. So that's kind of how a drainage area would work. And yeah, I hope that answers your question.
Peri, I'll try to do it with stream stats and show.
Oh yeah, that's way more useful.
Let me share my screen.
Yeah.
So this is a program called Stream Stats, and we use this to delineate basins and to estimate flows. And I must have picked a very big stream. But at this point right here.
Marc, your screen's not shared.
Oh, I'm sorry. Got to click share. There, can you see it now?
Yep, looks great.
Okay, so what I did is I looked at this river and I picked a point right here. And it delineates the basin based off of the topography. So it goes along ridges and, like somebody said, gullies and things like that. And it delineated this basin. So what I did is I must have picked the Stillwater River and in Flathead County. And it delineated this basin. if I click continue here and peak flow statistics, continue, and this is a free program. Anybody can get it, use it. And when I open the report, it shows that basin, and then it tells you the area that contributes to that basin is 573.4 square miles. So in that case, that's the area. And just like in your tables, it comes up with the different peak flows. An estimated peak flow for that is 5,410 CFS. Does that help explain what a drainage basin is?
I like the visual. Thanks, Mark.
Okay, I'm going to stop sharing then, unless there's any questions.
I think Paul has a comment too in the chat if you and Peri want to take a look at that as well. I'm not sure.
The dashed blue lines show the drainage area for the whole basin. Oh, you can see those on the index maps, I believe.
The drainage basin on the index map? Yeah, you're
I
right.
think the newer index maps have drainage basins on them. So
Hey, Peri,
yeah.
I found my notes that I shared about the text. So with regards to mapping, there's more to come, but with regards to mapping, my notes on the test said there were 12 riverine mapping questions. They were based on the Denver area map that showed the South Platte River, and there was another waterway, and it showed you cross sections A through K, which is exactly what you talked about today. It had a railroad, and it asked you to figure out the BFE of the road at the railroad bridge, and you had to use the flood profile. There were
I've got a sample.
Okay.
Yeah. I have a sample
questions on coastal at the end. And then multiple questions on coastal barriers, which we'll get into in 2 weeks. So.
Yeah, so I have a sample question that runs you through something like that, to try and figure out, one, what the BFE is, and then what the peak discharge is at that point too. So we are gonna.
Here's a quick example of that.
Yeah.
I'm using ArcGIS, which a lot of communities use. Most engineers use something like this. So if you needed to know the BFE where this black line is pointing right here, what you want to do is you want to measure from either this cross section or CT, CS or CT. And fortunately, if you're using a GIS, you can actually measure it right in this. But you do the same thing with your piece of paper is you'd lay it down here and you put tick marks on your paper until you got to a point where this line would be pretty much in line with the center line of the creek or the river. And of course it gave us it in meters, but we could change that to metric right there.
Yeah.
Or
and
bars.
So here's what my note says kind of about that is it says for a lot of the questions, they highlighted with a red square the location on the map that the question was referring to. One drawback was they gave you the firms, the FIS and the firmettes, but the little window that it like would pop up in couldn't be enlarged. So it made it kind of hard to find. You had to zoom in and out.
How did you measure things with that window? Did you use a piece of paper?
You didn't have to measure
they
because
gave you the distance?
They gave you that red square. And so you already knew where you were.
Okay.
I don't remember having to measure anything. Maybe
they might have given you the distance to the red square. So in this case, I've measured about 1,200 feet. Okay. And now if I go to the table, see where I put that. Now I got to move this bar away. In the FIS between CS and CT right here. And each of these little squares, you got to figure out what each of these little squares are worth. We've got 1,000 feet over 10 of these squares. So each square is worth 100 feet, right? So from CS, I can't remember what the distance I said it was.
1,200.
1,200. Okay, yeah. So I'm going to see if I could. I'd go over 1,200 feet from CS. Looks like I got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. So normally I'd be able to draw on this. So it's 3 from this, 3 squares from here. So go back up here. And I'm looking for the 1% flood event, which is, if you look down here on this bar, it's this two dashes right here. You can see it. So I go over 2, 1, 2, 3 squares, and then read over to the right, about right there. And now I've got 10 squares, 1 for each foot. So 3,170, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 right there. I think that's about where I was. So it's 3,175 feet. You can actually interpret and you use this. This is how you find the elevation. You don't do it with a mathematical formula. You need to use the FIS and the flood you call these tables.
Profile.
Yeah, flood profile tables. You got to use those, and sometimes you might go about half of one, so it'd be 3. If it happened to be right here, it'd be 3,175.5. And that's still the way we do it. It's kind of an old-fashioned way to figure it out. A lot of people will say, well, why don't you just use like a linear interpolation? Well, you can see these lines aren't really linear. They have bends in them, and they turn. So you can't just go with a algebraic formula and calculate it. You have to use these tables because these lines are not straight. Does that help? Or have I just confused everyone?
And that is definitely a question on the test.
Yeah.
But if you need practice, you have practice examples in the NFIP 101 on how to do that.
Yeah, and we will run through, I'm going to run you through a sample question from Flood County that does exactly this. And then we're going to add on next week. You also have to figure out what BF or what discharge counts for what area. So we'll make a little challenge question, but yeah, we will run through this next week and figure that out too. So much for you to look forward to. Very exciting.
Hey, Peri and Marc, we want to thank you guys for that. And I just want to reiterate, because I think Peri mentioned this too, it's super important for you to know this just in your day-to-day work. And I will tell you, as a previous local floodplain administrator, I was not trying to be an engineer. I did do checks on stuff that were coming in. So if I had a permit application that came in, these are some of the checks to make sure it looked reasonable. And I will tell you that I mentioned before, I did catch a couple of subdivisions that were trying to go in using incorrect data. And then once I was able to recognize that, I was able to reach out to the regional engineer and say, hey, can you look at this information for me? Because I think we might have an issue. And again, those were for subdivisions coming in, but they had received letter of map amendments on the property. So it's good to know how to just do a spot check. It's not saying it has to be perfect, but if it looks like it's way off, then that's a consideration for you as local floodplain administrators, or if you are working for a property owner, to say, hey, we might have an issue here, and you can do a little bit of further investigating, reach out to that regional engineer if you need to. So again, Mark and Peri, thank you guys so much.
Tracy, there's just one little short thing. I know we're kind of running over, but you want to caution floodplain administrators from providing too much information to maybe somebody that comes in and says, well, what's the base flood elevation at my home? I would suggest that you don't do that type of calculations. They can hire an engineer to do that.
Yeah.
You see what I'm saying, Tracy?
Oh my gosh, absolutely right. And I know that FEMA encourages that, but here's the thing, then you as a community become liable for the information you provide to them. Mark is absolutely right. When I say spot check, it should be spot check on information they provide to you.
Yeah.
Absolutely,
So,
Mark. Yeah.
Don't be using this method to try to help out somebody. You leave that up to the engineers and surveyors to provide that information, and then we'll double check it. We're not the consultants in this program. We're the regulators, and we do the checks and make sure that the information is sound. Just wanted to pass that on.
And Mark, I will stress, and not getting into any details on this, but I will tell you guys that there are a couple active major compliance issues where there were previous community officials that told people they were out of the floodplain and people built there. And now it's become an issue that it might be a civil suit. So be very careful, like Mark said. I'm not trying to scare you, but just be very careful. That's why we always say, yeah, you can give, like, look in the general location, but really all the information that you are reviewing or spot checking on is information that the property owner and their applicant or their technical assistance has provided to you. But you should know to be able to recognize, like, hey, there's a problem here. Yeah, John, info can be dangerous sometimes. Yeah, you gotta be really careful. And I know that's really hard because you want to help that property owner, but you're also wanting to protect your community from liability issues. And unless you're an engineer and you can stamp on that, I would caution you, like Mark said. So thank you guys so much for hanging in there. I know we went over a little bit. It's always such great information. And next week, get ready to be challenged on some of these mapping questions. I think these will really help you out. And I agree with what Shailia mentioned earlier. ASFPM and FEMA put together a Floodplain 101. I would look at, there's a way you can go through that whole Floodplain 101 or just parts of it. There's two options. I would go through that mapping one just to kind of brush up. And then we can tackle some of these real live questions, not just next week, but also at the AMFM conference. So you guys stay warm.
Tracy, can we send out an email that has that link and the link for the Flood County USA stuff on it?
Yes. Yep.
Let's do that.
And Peri, it has been sent multiple times too.
Let's just do it again. We'll just forward it.
Okay. And I don't know that I had the Flood County USA though on it. You might have to send me. Oh, I can probably find it. If you have it handy, send it. But I'll find it.
Sounds good.
All right. You guys take care and stay warm, and we'll talk to you guys soon. Bye. Thanks, Peri. Thanks, Mark.